Recently, in the last 6 years, I've had an opportunity to camp right on the shores of Lake Quinault. And each morning I would go for a couple hour walk through the woods. And living in a tent in the Olympic rainforest where they measured their rain by feet as opposed to inches. They have all different sizes of rain, the light misty rain that you can barely see, to the raindrops that could be as big as the end of your pinky, rain that would collapse my tent. There was a rain that would go sideways. My most beautiful rain is when they take the mist from the tall spruce and it would fall, the big drops would fall on the big skunk cabbage and make that beautiful thump, thump, thump. It's just the most magical, especially in the springtime with the birds singing. Then you see somebody running by with their Walkman on and you go, oh, so sad, so sad. But what I noticed as I was sharing legends and stories with people from all over the world that come to the lodge, it never surprised me on how many people complain about the rain. And especially when you come to the Quinault rainforest, but some of the people wanted their money back. It rained the whole time we were here, you know, well. And we always get, you know, we don't pan, we rust. There's the rain festival begins January 1st. Goes through December 31st. It goes on and on. Well, it got me thinking and researching, and I came across this beautiful legend called The Promise of the Whale. And it originates from a Vancouver Island tribe where they get almost twice as much rain as the Quinault rainforest. So this one had a very good pertinent of the reason why it rains so much. And it all begins long ago. Each year, the whales travel far up north to visit the great white spirit. Now, if you can imagine these whales beginning these hundreds and hundreds of miles, they begin this voyage just after the mama gives birth to their calves or their young baby whales. So if you can imagine these newborn whales traveling hundreds and hundreds of miles each year. But when the time comes, when those young whales will become an adult whale, there's a passage, a once in a lifetime passage, that when that whale must travel far out up north, all by themselves. Now these young whales look forward to this passage into adult whales, and many times they begin during the middle of the night. And it was no different for this one young whale named Kika. Now Kika began his voyage during the middle of the night, but as the sun started to rise and as the warmth of the rays hit his sides, a heaviness came over his eyes. Now remembering that if you don't get enough rain, it could make you very ill. So Kika decided to swim into this small inlet and take a short nap. Now it's hard to tell how long he'd been asleep, but when he awoke, the sun was still fresh in the air. Kika stretched his large body and he started swimming back out to sea. But as he came to the entrance of the inlet, to no surprise, the tide had lowered, leaving a large sandbar between him and the sea. Kika started swimming within the inlet, hoping another way out, but there was none. His tummy started to bubble and gurgle, and he started to partake of the small fish that were, in the same predicament as he. But as the days turned to weeks, those small fish had no means for such a large whale, and his ribs started to show through his side, and he closed his eyes for the last time. And as Kika closed his eyes, he thought how disappointed his parents would be. His sister wouldn't care. But as he lay there, all of a sudden, he started hearing voices. Voices. Is it voices of death calling his name so soon? With every ounce of energy, Kika opened one eye, and there in the distance were 3 small canoes. And in each of the canoe was one man. When the men saw the eye of Kika opened, they quickly dug their paddles in deep and made a safe distance between them and the whale. But in a weak voice, Kika announced to the men that he was too weak and too hungry to do any harm unto them. The men paddled so close, and as they got closer to the whale, they all gazed on this almost dead whale. And as they gazed onto this almost dead whale, they knew exactly how he felt. Because you see, each summer, the days would become longer and the heat would rise so hot that the slightest lightning would torch fires that would devour our longhouses, our canoes, and our belongings. And the fires came upon us every single summer. So when they gazed onto this almost dead whale, they knew how he was feeling. And then they just disappeared. Now Kika thought, how rude, just to gawk at me and take off like that. But within a matter of an hour, the canoes returned. One canoe was full of halibut, another canoe was full of cod, and the last canoe was full of salmon. Each of the fishermen took turns, and they fed the whale. And as the last salmon went down, Kika thanked his new friends, for they could have taken and eaten him for weeks. But one of the men announced, "We have much fish now, so each day we will come and we will feed you." So it was. Each day the men would arrive with their halibut, salmon, and cod. But on this one particular day, when the men arrived, they brought their wives, their children, their aunties, their uncles, the elders. Everyone came and sang and danced and ate. And when Kika finished the last fish, at that very moment, the tide had rose high enough for the freedom of the sea. When Kika reached the surface of the ocean, he took his large body high up into the air and smashed it against the surface, letting his parents know that he was alive and well. He then stopped and he came back to the people. With an already growing voice, Kika announced to the people, "I am traveling far up north to visit the Great White Spirit. And because of your kindness of keeping me alive, I will ask of any wish that you want? Puzzle. There was puzzle on all the people's faces. If he knew this great white spirit, one of the little girls came up and said, well, if you knew this great white spirit, like you knew this great white spirit, I mean, my dad was the one that gave you salmon. You ate a lot of salmon. But when he knew that great white spirit, like you said, you know the great white spirit, why didn't you call on the great white spirit when you were stuck in the internet? I mean, that great white spirit didn't know. Whoa, the whale announced. I am too far south for the great white spirit to hear my voice. So once again, I will ask of any wish that you want. Well, it didn't take the children 3 times to be told. The children quickly raised their arms and said, we want to stay up as late as we want. And then the men, they raised their arms and announced, we want women who can cook the salmon so that it's not so dry. Well, then the women, they had a meeting, a really long meeting. And when the women came forward and one of the elderly women announced, we want men who will share their feelings and their thoughts. The men go, we want women who don't talk so much. Well, with that, there were wishes upon wishes until finally the old elder came forward and he announced, have we not forgotten the long, hot summer days where the slightest lightning would torch fires that devour everything we own? Our wish shall be a reprieve of such hot summer days. The people paused. FYI, that's too big of a wish. Way too big of a wish. If we ask for that big of a wish, we're gonna lose that wish. But the old elder was very determined that that shall be the wish. And so it was. As Kika was leaving to travel far up north, he announced that he will ask and promise that he will ask a reprieve of such a hot summer day. Well, the days turned to weeks, and the weeks turned to months. Once again, the days started getting longer. The sun started to rise and give off more heat than could be stand. And when the words of all words started to filter through the woods as they went, fire! Now, with just enough time to gather what they could of their possessions in their arms and place it in their canoes, where they paddled oh so far from the shore. Some had seen it oh too many times and watched and looked down, as others watched as the flames got hotter and closer to the longhouses. And as the first longhouse started to burn, all of a sudden, there was one drop of rain, another drop of rain, and another drop of rain. The skies opened up and continued to rain until every single fire was put out. The men and the women danced and drank of the water that gathered in the crevices of the rocks. They sang and danced until the hardiest collapsed. And it was then that the old elder came forward and he announced, this is the promise of the whale. Oh. Don't get us started on that again. That was way too big of a wish. We lost that wish. We could have had women with big hearts. but we lost that wish. But the old elder announced, he goes, this is the promise of the whale. And the way that we can tell is if we shall raise our hands high up into the sky And if once all our hands raise to the sky, if it shall start to rain once again, we will know that this is the promise of the whale. And as the last little hands raised to the sky, all of a sudden, there was one drop of rain, another drop of rain, and another drop of rain. The skies opened up and continued to rain until the small creeks turned into streams, and the streams turned into rivers, meadows turned into lakes, ferns and moss grew before your eyes as the spruce, the cedars, the alders, and maples all reached for the sky. And it was then that the old elder came forward and he announced that this is the promise of the whale. And so to this day, whenever our coastal Salish people hear people complaining about the rain, we just smile, because we know the way that you see the land today was not the way it was long ago. And it was at that moment that the elder raised his talking stick, and because of our tribe have successfully brought the rain, our song from this day forward will go like this.